When Senator Patrick Leahy gabbles in the impeachment trial of the 45th Squatter of the United States Tuesday, the 46th president will be nearly 3 weeks into his 4-year term. Whether or not the Senate convicts Donald Trump of high crimes and misdemeanors, Joe Biden is already well on his way to undoing much of what his predecessor did. The list is stunning, basically. Biden has instituted a national mask mandate and increased the distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, and he announced that the U.S. would rejoin the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Accord, and he ended the emergency diversion of funds to build a wall on the Mexico border, and he extended an arms control agreement with Russia and reversed Trump administration policies on immigration and on racial equity and on banning transgender members of the military. As historian Thomas Belsersky pointed out, Biden's more than 40 executive orders, actions, and memorandums have drawn criticism, but they are a part of a deliberate strategy to project a new vision for the country, and it makes sense for him to use the power he has in this way. In fact, Biden and his team are modeling their first 100 days in office after the example of one former president in particular, Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Delano Roosevelt moved swiftly to confront the Great Depression in his first 100 days in office. Biden is pushing for a massive $1.9 trillion economic stimulus package amid the debate about whether it's what the COVID-scarred economy needs. Lan-Hee J. Chen had urged Biden to take seriously a proposal by Republican senators for a much smaller relief package if he plans to gain bipartisan support for other legislative priorities and in light of a slowly recovering economy. The recent economic data makes the case for more targeted relief, Chen wrote, but the unemployment is slowly but steadily declining and the size of the civilian labor market should be in 2022 what it was before the pandemic. Vicky Chavez is paying close attention to the change of government in Washington. She has been living with her 2 children in a Salt Lake City church that offered her sanctuary 3 years ago when an immigration judge rejected her request for asylum. Her family faced deportation to Honduras, but watching Biden's inauguration, her three-year-old daughter asked, does this mean we can go to Disneyland? As Anna Lakis Miller wrote, Chavez answered, not yet, but hopefully we can soon. If Biden really wants to send a message to asylum seekers that his administration is the new beginning that he promised, Miller observed, he should also grant those living in sanctuary the protection they need to leave church safely and ensure that they will be able to stay in the country until they are on a viable path to citizenship. But Donald Trump's trial in the Senate over the Capitol riots begins a year and 4 days after he was acquitted, in the same chamber abusing his power to press Ukraine's president to launch an investigation of Biden. The lone Republican who voted to convict Trump, Mitt Romney, said that in those words that turned out to be prophetic. Corrupting an election to keep oneself in office is perhaps the most abusive and destructive violation of one's oath of office that I could ever imagine. The Republican-controlled Senate refused to call witnesses in the trial, but Democrats who now run the chamber shouldn't make the same mistake, wrote Mike D'Antonio. Failure to call witnesses who could offer first-person accounts of the Trump insurrection would be prosecutorial misconduct. Including them would likely draw a bigger TV audience among Americans who want to hear fellow citizens and not politicians explain how Trump incited the mob that then waged a bloody attack and occupation of the U.S. Capitol. But Trump's home is now Mar-a-Lago instead of the White House, and the odds that 67 senators will vote to convict him are very slim. But the trial is vital anyway to establish for history's sake the rightful curbs on future presidential power, wrote Julian Zalazar. Through Twitter and the Klan rallies, the former squatter filled our airwaves with lies about voter suppression and the voter fraud and spurious claims of his victory, which he didn't have one. This was an extraordinarily dangerous use of the bully pulpit that aimed to do nothing less than overturn the legitimate results of an election by stoking anger, hatred, and distrust in the electoral. But five of Trump's impeachment lawyers withdrew amid reports that Trump wanted to re-up his discredited claim that massive voter fraud accounted for his defeat in November, which it didn't. But even though he did get defeated, but there was no massive voter fraud. But there are limits on what a defense attorney can argue. Wrote Ellie Holnig. For example, per the American Bar Association, it would be unethical for any attorney to raise an argument that he knows to be false. The rigged election narrative certainly fits this description. Senate Republicans have signaled that a more politically palatable defense will be to argue that the Constitution never envisioned a former official being tried after leaving office. The one counterexample was the 1876 impeachment trial on corruption allegations of former Secretary of War William Belknap, who served in President Ulysses S. Grant's administration. As the Senate's website notes, on March 2nd of 1876, just minutes before the House of Representatives was scheduled to vote on articles of impeachment, Belknap had raced to the White House, handed Grant his resignation, and burst into tears. Tim Naphtali wrote that when the Belknap trial came to the Senate, which was then under a Republican majority, the issue of whether it was constitutional gave the president's supporters, along with senators who were against outlawing official corruption, an easy way out. But there's a danger of a similar outcome this time. Basically, warning the Trump case could result in a zombie Senate trial that mindlessly sleepwalks to an acquittal. What happens to Trump after the trial? Larry Ty suggested that an apt parallel is the fate of Senator Joseph McCarthy, the Red Baiter, who had terrorized public life in the early 1950s until he chose an enemy too big to bully, the mighty U.S. Army, the most stout-hearted and sacrosanct institution in America, which had just basically waged a lethal war on the Korean Peninsula against communists. The Senate voted to condemn McCarthy. Newspapers banished him to page 25, next to the corset ads, or wrote him out entirely. So did his Senate colleagues, being subjected to a punishment so extreme that it had been meted out just 5 times in that chamber 165 years, meant trading in the badge of the outlier, which McCarthy had probably worn from his first days in office for the stigmata of the shunned that made him the butt of even the president's jokes. For the moment, though, Trump's influence remained strong within the Republican Party. The House Republican Conference refused to strip extremists. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, the dumb cunt of her committee assignments after CNN's K-File revealed that the lies and incendiary language that the freshman Congress from Northwest Georgia had been spreading on social media. The House Democrats, who were in the majority, then voted to remove Greene's committee rules, which only 11 Republicans supported. Greene's toxic talk creates a huge headache for the Republicans, wrote Republican Alice Stewart, and it's about time the party hit the reset button. We need to turn the page on the Trump brand of outlandish and embarrassing leadership, and on Thursday's vote was a step in the right direction. We need to focus on the conservative policies and not a cult of personalities. Senate Majority Leader Moscow Mitch spoke out against the lies and conspiracy theories, which is fucking odd because when Trump fucking touted conspiracy theories and lies, Moscow Mitch never said shit. So he's not one to fucking talk. He basically called Marjorie Taylor Greene a cancer for the Republican Party, which is what Trump was, while praising Representative Liz Cheney, a Republican leader who voted to impeach Trump. Richard Bond, who formerly headed the Republican National Committee, wrote that McConnell knows that the GOP is at a tipping point. Republicans can continue to embrace Trump's toxicity and big lie tactics and continue to coddle extremists, or they can, like the fictional newscaster Howard Beale in Network, declare that they are mad as hell, and they are not going to take it anymore and are going to change their ways and reclaim the party. This is not just a Republican problem, observed Frida Gittes. It is a flashing red light for the entire country, warning America that if it continues on this path, it will become a country without guardrails against extremist ideologies. We have seen how that has played out in other countries, and it doesn't bode well for the U.S. But history provides a parallel, wrote Zachary Karabell in Politico. In the mid-19th century, he noted, the American Party, popularly referred to as the Know-Nothings, controlled state houses and had more than 40 members in the House. Most of them supported the stringent nativists and anti-immigrant legislation, all emerged from conspiratorial clubs that had spread theories about possible papist aggression and plots against the sovereignty of the United States, but then the movement fractured. The sudden implosion of the Know-Nothings should also serve as a warning to Republicans that the forces that have propelled them to the apex of American politics, helping Donald Trump win the White House, can also tear them apart, leaving barely a trace. And then we still got the vaccines going on. Basically, Biden, I know, is trying to distribute as many vaccines as he can, but let's see here. Okay, so a month after January 6th, that was the riot. When David Morse watched the Capitol riot play out on January 6th, he was particularly disgusted by the presence of serious-looking guys that were outfitted in tactical gear, wearing the unit patches and insignia that I recognized. Morris, who's a Marine veteran, wrote that he was shocked but not surprised by the substantial number of middle-aged military veterans, which were guys like him. He basically said that he had seen a lot of white nationalism during his 8 years in uniform. It is